Approval of the agenda.
Make a motion, we approve the agenda.
Do you have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor, roll call.
Dozier,
Yes.
Harmer,
Yes.
Loaiza,
Yes.
and Atkinson.
Yes. Management reports.
Certainly, members of the committee, we thought we'd work on some proposed roles and responsibilities of the committee, just to help narrow your scope and make your time more efficient and effective. And so our city attorney's office, based on the presentation from last week, prepared us some roles and responsibilities in draft form. So if you want to discuss those, make any changes, but they are consistent with what he spoke in terms of keeping the work of the charter to those that pertain to the city without imposing and encroaching into affairs of the state, of statewide concern. As he mentioned to you during the presentation, there are items in the city charter that are applied to all the cities that are part of the state constitution, like the Brown Act, also labor negotiations, personnel matters, just to mention a few examples. So I'll have the city attorney at this time just kind of make a brief presentation on that, walk you through that, and then you can have discussion. We're recommending that the committee approve the proposed roles recommendations after you have recommendation. And so with that, Henry, can you go ahead and provide that, please?
I can. Thank you, Gabriel. Let me share my screen.
Okay.
I hope everybody can see my screen.
There we go.
Hi, good evening, committee. I wanted to do a short presentation about the expectations and goals of the Charter Review Committee tonight. So as I previously presented, California cities are either general law or charter cities. The city of Shafter is a charter city that adopted its city charter on June 6, 1995. This presentation will address purpose of the Charter Review Committee and specific actions expected of the Charter Review Committee. The purpose of the Charter Review Committee. So the purpose of the Charter Review Committee is to review the charter. Coinciding with the decennial census, the City Council is required to establish a Charter Review Committee to conduct a review of the city charter. And the Charter Review Committee is responsible for making recommendations for the City Council to consider at a later date. The revisions would be revisions to the city charter that may be beneficial to the city. The goals and expectations of the Charter Review Committee are to attend briefings and trainings provided by the city, review the minutes and documents of the preceding Charter Review Committee, conduct meetings to discuss proposed changes to the city charter, and complete a charter amendment proposal and file report with the city clerk by the deadline that is June 30th of 2022. So we have about approximately 2 months to complete this work. Additional expectations of the Charter Review Committee are to avoid proposing changes that are matters of statewide concern. So like I touched on my previous presentation, matters of statewide concern are out of bounds for the Charter Review Committee, and they're out of bounds for any charter city. These matters of statewide concern involve educational school systems, regulations of traffic and vehicles, franchises for telephone or telegraph lines, licensing of a trade or profession, tort claims against a government entity, taxation of savings and loan associations, the Brown Act, and eminent domain. Your review and your recommendations will solely be based on or solely be related to municipal affairs, which involve municipal elections, method of enacting local ordinance, compensation of city officials, land use and development, acquisition and establishment of municipal parks, operation of municipally owned utilities, and the imposition of license tax on local businesses. So as you'll also see once we start reviewing some of these city charters in the next management report, you'll see that all of the charters involve these municipal affairs. And that's pretty much, that summarizes the presentation. Is there any questions?
We don't see any over here.
Okay, and I'll be available if there's any questions throughout the meeting. Thank you.
Review of city charters. Was that going to be you?
Yeah, it should be all of us.
Oh, okay.
But going back to item one, is the proposed roles and responsibilities something that you're willing to consider to adopt for you as a committee, just so that it identifies your focus of your work that you'll be doing here? Yeah, you as a committee, we prepared them as for you to consider to adopt them, that this would be the roles and responsibilities for the committee.
Okay. We have a motion? to
Oh,
adopt
it's
the
for
rules?
deliberation for you among, if it's something you want to adopt, you can discuss among yourselves. And if you're in agreement, or if you want to make any changes, or you simply can say, you know what, we're fine with actual roles
I'm
and
in agreement.
responsibilities.
Dennis, you want to discuss anything or are you fine with it?
No, I'm kind of familiar with some of these. We've already spent a lot of time in Lancaster and Palmdale.
Mhm.
I'm fine with the roles and responsibilities, you know. But yeah, I mean, we're a charter city and I understand, obviously, we're not going to be changing any state law or any
Right.
precedent law. So I mean, yeah.
Short term.
All right. Okay, thank you for that. So city charters, so members of the committee, we provided to you samples of city charters from other cities. As our city attorney in his presentation last week told you, of about 485 cities, maybe 25% of those cities are charter cities, 100 and so. And what you saw in these charters, just by way of example, you got cities like Lancaster, that's basically 4 pages, all the way to like San Bernardino, that it's multiple pages. So it's pretty straightforward in terms of the type of charters that other cities have. Just as, again, they were provided to you as examples for you to get an idea of how complex a city's charter can be. If we offered them to you, we prepared them and provide them to you as samples. If there's any discussion on those, any comments, anything that stood out from among those city charters, we can be happy to have a discussion on that, but it doesn't pertain to us, but it was just an example for you. Another thing we've done, both Henry and I have done work with other cities and they're reviewing their charters, is we can do a matrix if it's helpful for you of taking some of the different areas, like for example, in ours, powers and duties of the city, mayor and council, and put those in categories on a spreadsheet or a table, and then compare it to some of the other cities. So you can get an idea, a comparison of how our charter aligns with other cities. And so that's one idea. If it helps the committee kind of zero in. One of the things when looking at the city charter is there anything that stands out that's different from other cities? And so that would give you an opportunity to compare our charter to other cities. And is it aligned with best practices? Is it aligned with what other cities have as well? Anything that may stand out obviously may raise a question. It may allow you to then an opportunity to have more conversation, direct us to do more research to see if that's maybe a particular area that you may want to change or make a recommendation to the council to change or to streamline. Keep in mind, this was written back in the early mid-90s.
Yeah, way back.
Way back.
Mhm.
And so a lot of things have changed since then, right? But some of them have remained the same. The departments, you know, city manager, mayor and council. I mean, so that's one that, like I said, that's something we can do for the committee if it helps you in terms of knowing your scope of where you want to focus to really do some analysis and can make any consideration for any
You
recommendation.
could do a spreadsheet with checks on things that are common, and
Yeah.
I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah, I'm okay with that too. If you'd like to, that's fine.
Useful.
Okay. Yeah. Like I said, I mean, we didn't expect you to read all of these charters, but as you can see, there's more detail. It gets into civil service. City of Bakersfield talks about how to hire, the hiring practices, who hires who, on and so forth. Ours doesn't get into such depth, but it'd definitely be a matrix that would be helpful for you. So, okay. So we'll prepare that in time for and get that to you in advance of the next, before the next meeting. So you have an opportunity to study it prior to.
Cool. Is there anything else you want to see at our next meeting?
Not particularly, Dennis. I mean, thank you for this. There was a link, so I am one of those that reviewed the different cities.
Okay.
And so the only thing I will tell you as a city manager, and this is just me as more of a, concerned citizen, not necessarily a committee member here today of any kind, but is that obviously when we compare cities, we want to be compared with successful cities and positive cities and cities that are moving in what Shafter would consider the right direction.
Mhm.
So fiscally sound cities, cities that are looking towards the future. So that's, like I said, not necessarily me as, I mean, yes, that is me as a committee member here, but also as just simply a concerned citizen. So I will tell you this, when you present something to us, I think our time, because we do only meet, is it 4 or 5 meetings?
Yes.
Our time is valuable. And so make sure that you present to us things that are pertinent to Shafter specifically, and that we're not going to leave here going, can you believe they compared us to this or this or that, successful, positive. So yeah, just that's my only 2 cents.
So if I may just, if we looked at the list of the cities that of the charges, you got Anaheim, for example, you got City of Hayward, Irvine, Lancaster, Palmdale, Riverside, Santa Rosa, San Bernardino. We can narrow it to these, or we can expand that research and look for other cities that were not provided to you in terms of sample. Like I said, there's about 100 or so cities throughout the state that we can expand and get copies of their charters. City of Anaheim, I mean, that's a city of about 300,000 population. So they got a lot more issues, and their charter, obviously, as you can see here, is more complex, a lot more integral of different areas they get into. City of Hayward is Bay Area, different part of the state, different dynamics, different issues that they deal with. So as you can see, again, 40 pages of it. They get into different areas, very specific to specific, from street parking to, leasing space for commercial purposes, very, very specific. City of Irvine, again, city down in Southern California, very successful city, a very innovative community. And so, I mean, that's one city, but it's not comparable to Shafter in terms of size, but it is in terms of their success. I mean, it's been very innovative. It's when you compare to other cities, it's one of the better cities in Southern California. And so, I mean, if you wanted to compare, we can keep that in the list. So I'm asking you for some feedback here. That's city. So we're not going to find cities in terms of size of population.
There aren't too many our size.
Yeah, or maybe even budget. But in terms of overall, the way the city has been managed, the way the city has been led by its elected officials, in terms of innovation and progress and economic development and financial stability, Irvine would be one of those cities by way of example. City of Lancaster, right, just on the other side of down south of Mojave, just as well. It's been a very, in their own way, very successful city for that part of the country. Palmdale as well. A lot of growth, a lot of economic development, a lot of it in the aerospace because of Edwards down in that area. So they're in that northeast sector of LA County, a little bit not directly within the LA Basin area, but definitely they've had their own success. So those are 2 cities. Riverside just as well, but a larger city, obviously. Santa Rosa, way north, California, and then San Bernardino. Definitely, we would not want to do a comparison to San Bernardino. That's definitely, it's been well documented, a lot of their financial issues and political turmoil they've had probably in the last 10 years. And just the simple fact that it's completely anomaly when you look at it in terms of other cities. So I asked the question because not all these cities, like I said, we wanted to cover a broad area of the state, not just a particular area. So just to give you an example, based on geographical area of the state, what the cities that are charter cities in terms of what it looks like for them. But based on for the matrix, we can take the same number of cities, or you want us to, as you suggested, cities are more comparable to Shafter in terms of their success, financial stability, pertinent to what is Shafter. We can do a little bit more research on that.
Is there any charter cities in the valley that,
You got
comparable to that?
Bakersfield. I know Bakersfield. We'll have to expand that research a little bit more, but not too many come to mind. I mean, just in Kern County alone, besides Bakersfield and Shafter, all the other cities I'm almost certain are general law cities. And so there's 11 cities in Kern County. There's only 2 that are charter cities. So we'd have to go up north, look at Tulare County, Fresno, and just work our way up. But if that's where the committee wants to go, to focus on Central Valley charter cities, we can do that. Or we can, like I said, look at keep some of these like Palmdale, Lancaster, a little bit to not Central Valley, but definitely not LA either, or Southern California. And in terms of size, they're probably 40, 60,000 more in population, but that's the type of comparable cities we're going to find. So any feedback from the committee?
well, my experience is I worked for Tone Ranch for 40 years, and several of our board members are from Irvine, and a couple of them were involved in the Irvine development. Lancaster, the mayor's brother, was on the adjudication board with us. So, and Tone has a lot of interest over in the desert. So yeah, those are all, I think, good examples of things that are working pretty well. So I'm okay with the ones that you've selected here.
If I could say something real quick, I would put that focus on the ones that are like mostly fiscally successful compared to us, because we're going to grow a lot over the next 10, 20 years. And who knows how big Shafter will be in that time.
Yeah, I'm okay with the list that, first of all, thank you for putting together the list. I'm okay with the list you put together. And for me, yeah, it's always nice to compare yourself to another city that's maybe geographically the same as you in the valley. However, I understand that really there may not be a lot that compared to us fiscally or as sound as Shafter, I'll say it that way. So I'm okay comparing ourselves to non-valley also as well. And again, I think this committee, my understanding, we're just going to make certain recommendations. Again, the city council has to, decide if they're the right recommendations, and then eventually it will go to the voters. But so I think this committee, though, is that we all live here in Shafter, and we understand the differences at the same time between cities like Anaheim, Irvine, or even Lancaster versus us. I'm not here to tell you the truth. I'm not here to make a recommendation on our charter about street parking necessarily.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's good, Gabriel.
Well, I had several conversations with one of our corporate attorneys. He was a city attorney for Anaheim. So we discussed a lot of the valley versus the big city. Of course, he had Disneyland in his back pocket, so a little different. But yeah, no, I think if you could do a comparison with the ones you've got, I think it would be good for us.
Okay. Oh, and we'll expand that just to see if there's we can find other comparable cities based not so much on geographic or population size, but in terms of growth, economic development activity, financial, fiduciary success.
Speaking to growth, this charter was completed in 1995. Since then, what has our population changed? Do you know, Gabriel?
Oh, gosh.
And what's the percentage of growth by year
We were probably about 10,000 population.
at that time?
Yeah, mid-90s, it's probably about 10, and today we're about 22,000 population and growing. Our general plan, our current general plan that was adopted early 2000s, at full build out, our population was estimated to be about 80,000. We're probably more in line to get to probably double what we're at right now. If you look at Gossamer Grove, that whole 7 standard corridor alone, Gossamer Grove, you got Mission Lakes and Heritage Ranch yet to be built, those two, the latter. At full build out, we're talking close to about 10,000 more housing units at full build out over the next 5 to 10 years. Planners will tell you, urban planners will tell you it's 3.2 residents per household. And so, 10,000 units, that's another 30,000.
That's what it used to be.
Yeah.
Now there's more families than,
Yeah, it's fluctuating, it's changing, but
yeah.
even at 3.2 per household,
That's a lot
you're
of
looking
people.
at,
Mhm.
30,000 population. So we'll easily at full build out be between 50, 60,000 population, just on the current growth. Then you got another approximately 1,500 units within the core city of Shafter to still be built out. You got Beach and Fresno, you got Tulare, and then some other infill
What's
lots.
over here on Los Angeles.
Yeah, Los
Another
Angeles.
100 units.
Mhm. So all of those smaller maps within the core city add up to about 1,500 units at full build out. And so when you add another 1,500 to 10, you can see that we're going to continue to grow considerably over the next 5 to 10 years.
So you're young. When I was there, it was like 6,000 people. That was it. That kind of included some of the outside of the city people.
Must have been nice back then, Dennis. You could.
It was pretty
everywhere,
nice.
huh?
But then we started growing. It was slow at first, but we've been picking up speed. So
So that's a good committee member, Gerard. That's something to keep in mind that, we are going to be growing. So while we may be a smaller city today, is looking at some of these, doing a comparison to other city charters that may be larger. It's like, okay, what areas did they get into based on the larger population of a city? And is that pertinent to us? Maybe not today, but being that we don't do any amendments to the charter for every 10 years, it's not like something we do all the time. So the next update won't be till 2030. So.
well, I'm glad we pushed our boundaries out so we could kind of control what's happening in our city. So
Well, our area we're 38 square miles, city Shafter. That's considerably for a city of 22,000 population. That's a pretty large area.
Mhm.
There's no question we'll be growing. The key is that obviously the residents here, Chapter, want smart growth. Sound government and sound decisions moving forward.
any other comments on the city charters that we want to look at? Hearing none. Number 3.
Certainly. So between the city attorney and I, hopefully by now you've had an opportunity to review the city charter itself. And on our schedule, we have to get into section Article 1 through 4. We can do that tonight if you've had an opportunity to review that, to stay on schedule. These are probably going to be the easiest of the articles to get into because there probably won't be any changes or recommendations. But we wanted to see if you had any questions in particular that stand out from our current charter before we dive into section Articles 1 through 4, just so that myself or the city attorney can answer any questions or any follow-up research on that for you. So as you see, the city charter, our city charter, in my opinion, it's well written. And it covers the pertinent areas that we need from, the powers and duties to the way the mayor and council, city manager, department, agent, the employees, financial procedures, elections, that's consistent with state code. And then just general provisions related to conflict of interest. And then obviously just the charter amendments and the last article, Article 11 transition. But I mean, that's boilerplate language, really. So anything in particular that when you reviewed it may have stood out that you had a question to better understand at this time?
Anything else?
Nothing in particular stands out?
I have no questions regarding.
I also don't have any questions.
Okay. So in our schedule, we had Articles 1 through 4. Article 1, like I said, it's the corporation, name and form of government, you know, we're a council manager for, so the name, I mean, City of Shafter is our name. I don't believe there would be any recommendation to change any of that, right? Boundaries, you know, we have that already established. Like I said, we're 38 square miles, our sphere of influence, our city limits, you know, those are already existing. We've done that with the annexations in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then our form of government, I don't believe it's ever been considered to change the form of government between council manager form of government. There's different forms of government. You got strong mayor, you know, city of Fresno comes to mind, where the mayor is the chief executive officer. Then the city council is a voting block, and then the city manager is usually appointed by the mayor. So that's a strong mayor form of government. You could have a mayor, council, city manager, where the mayor is elected at large. That's its own seat, and it's not appointed by the 5 council members. So I don't think that's been anything to be contemplated to change the form of government. I think council manager form of government is what you're going to find in of the 485 cities. That's probably going to be the majority form of government you're going to find, council manager. And so that basically means it's the city council, and then among them they'll appoint a mayor, and then the city council fires the city manager. The city manager. So that's the form of government that city has taken on. So I don't believe that you guys are the committee's considering changing any of that, right?
No.
No.
Okay.
The city manager can't have 5 bosses.
They go up. I've had 9 at one point in my career. Article 2, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It's the definitions. Just basically what it means so it's self-explanatory. Anything here that you felt needed either clarification or change in definition, I think everything here still would apply today as it did in 1995. So.
Are we done with?
Yeah, I was asking about definitions. If there's anything that stood out for you in the charter itself that you felt needed clarification, that we can either add to the definitions, the list that's provided in the definitions, is that sufficient? Like I said, there's nothing that stands out that's changed from 1995 till now in terms of definitions. It's pretty clear, it's straightforward. If not, we have no change. We could just move on from Article 2.
Yeah.
I think that's okay. All right, then we had Article 3, which is powers and duties of the city. Oh, excuse me, I should have silenced that. So you got powers of the city, and you have general law powers, municipal affairs, intergovernmental powers, construction, and then you got section 3.02, duties and obligations of the city. Again, they're from legal and for myself, there's no changes here that we've seen that would, in our opinion, But anything that stood out for you, it's just self-explanatory. If you read it, it states what the powers of the city shall be for general law or charter city under the Constitution. It's pretty much some of what the city attorneys covered in his presentations as well. So. Okay.
Anything else?
And then we had Article 4, which is considered mayor and council. This outline stipulates the role of council or the 5 members elected at large, eligibility, regular election, who's elected, in terms of the greatest number of votes, procedure for holding elections, the election term and council election, the commencement of term, general powers of the council, duties of the council, the role of the mayor, and duties of the mayor, mayor pro tem, council compensation and expense. Henry, on this section 4.06, I think there's been changes in terms of council compensation based on population of city.
I believe you're correct, Gabriel. I could bring that information to the next meeting and share it with the committee.
Yeah, so this might be something that may warrant some research.
But
So-
right now, the council sets their own wages.
Right, but yeah, it's stated here. So it says the council may determine the salary and compensation of the mayor, mayor pro tem, and council members by ordinance. But no ordinance increasing such salary become effective until the commencement of the term of the council members elected at the next regular election. So that basically means even if they increased it, they changed their compensation, it wouldn't be effective until after November, right? Goes on to say the mayor, mayor pro tem, council members shall receive reimbursement for their actual necessary expenses incurred in the performance of their duties of office. Such reimbursement to be made pursuant to schedule expenses adopted by council resolution. That section pertains to whenever council members travel on official city business in their official capacity to League of California City conferences, planning commissions, economic development commissions, seminars, whatever the case may be. Basically means that they're reimbursed for their actual expenses, so long as they're in their official capacity for them. But like I said, we'll have to work with our city attorney's office, because I know that there's been changes to where cities or city councils, not our city council, but in general, there's guidelines for how they can be compensated based on population. So a city, if you remember the city of Bell, Southern California, their council members were paying themselves 6-figure stipends and then so because of that, they passed legislation that put caps on what that compensation is. Very nominal, but it's based oftentimes on population. So there's triggers that the state put in there for how much cities of certain population, city councils can pay themselves based on that population. So,
But is that an automatic population of the census is 200,000 people? The fee?
no, it's still up for each council to adopt that. So,
Okay.
so just because the population increases doesn't mean that their compensation would increase commensurate to them.
Okay.
The city council still would have to bring a resolution forward to increase.
And vote on it.
And vote on it and to make it effective. So to your question, no, it's not automatic, but there are those guidelines that provide for that. Oftentimes what you find is councils will leave their compensation alone just because it's more of a fiduciary responsibility, right? That they're not doing it for the money. It's more of a volunteer for the greater good of the community. But you oftentimes find some cities may increase their compensation for council for whatever reason, discretion in that city. So we can do some more research, and this might be an area that we can bring back some more information for you. I don't know. I mean, that's something that,
It'd be nice to see what other people are doing.
okay. Section 4.07 gets into the prohibitions of council. Basically just no council member shall hold city office or city employment during the term. So basically, our council members can't be city employees either. They can't be in an official capacity representing the city other than as an elected official. Personnel restrictions, neither council or any of its members may be in any manner or control, require the appointment or remove a city department or employee whom the city manager or any subordinate city manager is empowered to appoint. So this basically restricts the city council from getting involved in personnel matters. And that falls on the role of the city manager. And so this basically just outlines that they're basically stating that councils are not to intervene in those type of matters. Restriction of interference with city manager. This is, you can see this probably in a lot of the charters. This basically means that the council works for the city manager. The city manager is the one employee that they have full control over. They hire, fire, and they give direction to the city manager. And it just basically stipulates that neither the mayor or council member shall give orders to discipline or threaten any subordinate city manager, publicly or private. And that the main council may express its views and fully or freely discuss with the city manager anything pertaining to appointment, removal of city officers, department heads, and employee. Section 4.08. I'm kind of just going through, reading through if anything stands out. Okay, all right.
You're good.
Section 4.08, council vacancies. This basically outlines that whenever a vacancy becomes open for whatever reason, that a council member may step down from council. Give some examples here, whether it's from a member's death, resignation, removed from office or forfeiture of office in any manner authorized by state law. And it describes the procedure that we will follow in terms of filling the vacancy, and states here within 15 working days of the occurrence. The council vacancy following a published notification, persons eligible submit that are interested in filling the vacancy shall file a standard application with the city clerk. It talks about on the 16th day following creation of the vacancy, city clerk shall provide to the remaining council members the applications of all eligible applicants, and within 30 days of receipt of applications or soon thereafter as possible. The council by majority vote shall make an appointment from among the eligible applicants. In the event a council member vacancy occurs within 3 months prior to a regularly scheduled election of council members, the council may by majority vote on the entire council elect not to appoint a council member by methods prescribed in this section. So anything outside of those 90 days before a general election in November, let's say, so I would put it October, September, August timeframe, right? So anything prior to August, someone steps down today, this would be the procedure we follow. Closer, let's say they resign, step down September, October, well, within those 90 days of a general election, the majority of the council can just vote and say, well, we're not going to appoint anybody. We're just going to wait for the election, and whoever gets elected, and that's who comes on council. So. And then the limit of appointment. No appointed council member has served more than 2 years prior to standing for election at the regular municipal. So this basically means that if someone, let's say new council member, election takes place November, and for whatever reason in January, right after they get appointed, they have to step down, right? Well, they still would technically have 4 years on their term, right? So if the appointment takes place, the person getting appointed could only be in the seat until the next election. So it's basically like a 2-year appointment because it can't exceed more than those 2 years. That's basically what this section applies.
Isn't that? He gets appointed for 2 years. He has to stand for re-election in the next election, and that's only for 2 years to get back on the regular cycle.
Exactly. And that can mean that he may be appointed, but still lose the election.
Right.
Yeah. You know, I've seen that happen. So.
Yeah.
Forfeiture of office. This basically stipulates a council member shall forfeit the office of, if the council member, one, lacks any qualification for the office prescribed by this charter or by law at any time during the term of office for which elected, violates any express provision of this charter, or fails to execute or abide by any mandatory provision thereof, is convicted of a crime involving moral turpitude, fails to attend 3 consecutive regular meetings without being excused by the council, fails to attend 85% of the meetings of the council during any 12-month period without having been excused by the council, is found guilty of violating any other standards for the conduct of council members established by ordinance. The termination of forfeiture under sections 1, 2, and 6 of this section 4.08C shall be made as follows. Any one or more council members shall file a written complaint with the city council alleging a violation of subsections 1, 2, or 6 by a council member for purpose of determining whether a council member has violated his charter pursuant to subsection 2. Any ordinance establishing standards for the conduct of council members pursuant to subsection 6 above, the city shall conduct an administrative hearing. So this again stipulates the process at which a council member violates one of the 6. You know, it's not an automatic. The city council has to conduct an administrative hearing, and the city shall, by ordinance, establish procedures for conducting the administrative hearing, qualifications for the appointment of a hearing officer. It shall be a person other than the city officer or council member. For purposes of conducting a hearing here under, the council shall appoint a hearing officer by resolution, and a council member shall be deemed to have forfeit office as of the date the hearing officer issues an order finding that a council member has violated this charter or an ordinance pursuant to subsections 2 or 6 above. So in other words, a council member, one of their peers cannot be the hearing officer, nor can the council appoint myself or the city attorney or any other city official to be the hearing officer. It has to be an independent person to serve as the hearing officer. And basically, once that hearing officer makes a determination that that council member violated one of these sections, then his or her decision is final. And the council member that found to be in violation of any of these would have to forfeit their seat. Anything that in particular this section?
I do have a quick question.
Go ahead.
You mentioned in that sections 1, 2, and 6, subsection 3, what would be a definition of a moral turpitude crime?
Okay. Henry, let me defer to you to answer that.
Commissioner, I think that we would base it on case law of the definition of moral turpitude. So it would be on a case-by-case basis.
So to give an example, more of a city officer, like a city manager, or something like that. DUIs, that can be a moral turpitude, taking bribes, doing criminal activities pertaining to, transport, distribution or drugs or something like that. I mean, that's where you get into that. It's still a crime, but also infringes into moral turpitude in terms of just
Wasco just went through that.
something like that.
Yeah.
But you've seen city managers work, I mean, elected officials, they work for, they're hired by, basically they're elected by the constituents, but, city employees are, but anyway, that's kind of some examples of moral turpitude.
Okay.
Did that help? Just to kind of give
Yes,
an example?
that helped definitely. Wasco was exactly what I had in mind, the whole issue they had with their mayor and the DUI.
Yeah. There's other, I mean, we're not picking our neighboring cities, but I mean, it's been in the paper. So what I'm about to say, it's not anything that hasn't been publicly published out there. But the city of Delano, you got a council member that supposedly was
Oh, yeah.
directing the city manager to not discipline another city employee and basically interfering in the roles of the city manager. That could creep into more perpetuity, and it's so those are just some examples on a regional within the region that you can make an argument for.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Section 4.09, you got council organization meetings and rules. And this basically outlines the manner which the city council will meet and how often. So it says the process for the selection of mayor pro tem, the time and place of regular meetings, method of calling meetings, rules of order for the conduct of proceeding by the council, and selection of mayor pro tem in the event of a vacancy in that office shall be established by ordinance. And then you get into independent audit. This is the financial piece. Basically says independent audit for section 4.10 is that the council shall provide for an independent annual audit of all city financial accounts and documents and provide for more frequent or more specialized audits as it deems necessary. Auditor limitations. All audits should be made by a CPA experienced in city auditing. Selection of the audit firm shall be made no later than 60 days before the end of the fiscal year to be audited. The selected audit firm shall have no personal interest, direct or indirect, in the fiscal affairs of the city or any other officers. The selected audit firm may not provide services to the city other than audit and directly allied financial reporting services for 1 year after the conduct of any annual audit.
Who is our auditor now?
We just went to a new one last year. It's a couple of different names. Not coming
Is it
to-
one of the big four, big six? Or is it more
They're
of
out
a
of Southern
local?
California, so they're not local. I think, there's probably they went from big six, there's probably big four now. Yeah, I think they've narrowed down, but I don't think it's one of the big
Okay.
four. No. So this basically says once a year at the end of the fiscal year, our fiscal year goes from July 1 to June 30th. And our financial transactions is what's our audits conducted for the fiscal year. So from any financial transaction between July 1st and June 30th. So for example, the current fiscal year is about to end for us. Or in May, June 30th, fiscal year 21-22 will conclude. And so we were going to hire a new auditor. According to our procedures, we would have had to have already had an auditor in place now. We would have had to gone out to do an RFP back in like January, February, reviewed and awarded the contract so that we did. So we had an auditing firm prior to the 60 days of the fiscal year ending. Okay. That auditing firm obviously can't have any interest in the city, right? They can't be an investor in land around the city or economic development type project or something like that. So they would have a conflict with that. And then the other is that they could only be coming in to do an audit of the financial transactions. So sometimes cities may hire an accountant to come in and help with a special project or help do some year-end cleanup. And what this says is that to avoid any conflict, they can't do any of that work and still be the auditor. They have to maintain independency of that work. Also, because the city of Bell, auditors are required that if they do the audit after the third year, so they do more than 3 years, well, they have to change, but also it's subject to peer review.
Oh,
Yeah, so they would have to send their audit out to another accounting firm to do a peer review to make sure that the audit is aligned with generally accepted accounting practices. And so that's basically what this section is saying. And then, you get into section B, selection of the auditor and audit submitted to the city council and staff responds to audit systems letter. This is pretty much standard what you're going to find in any city charter and even general law cities.
Just for my own knowledge regarding firm experience in city auditing, how many years is that typically for that firm to have considered to be experienced? I'm just curious. What is that typically?
So most large firms, they're going to be anywhere between 10+ years or more, right? We typically, cities will typically shy away from, I mean, it's been known, right? But we typically shy away from more mom and pop type accounting firms with limited experience. To do a governmental auditing, you have to have years of experience and focus and just understanding governmental accounting. And so we always look for firms that at least have minimally 10 or plus years auditing experience. And we look at clients list, we do referrals, we look at what cities they may have done audits for and whatnot. And we call that city and say, what was the experience with the auditors and whatnot. But yeah, we typically look for, even though they may not fall on one of the big four auditing firms, but definitely we look for they're reputable firms, experienced firms, but more so too that they have a concentration in governmental auditing division. So like locally here, you got Brown Armstrong, who's been around for forever. Gosh, going back 80s, 90s, probably, since those guys have been around. That firm's been around and they continue to be, I think they went down from 3 to now it's just Brown Armstrong. But yeah, a firm like that's been around forever. So that's what we look for.
In the corporate world, you can keep the same auditor, but when you go past 3 years, you have to get a new partner. So whoever the partner has been in charge of that audit, he can't be there anymore and his team can't. But you can get another partner. But there's several good firms in Bakersfield.
Yeah.
You know.
And some firms, not to digress from it, but some firms got out of the governmental auditing after Bell because they didn't want to deal with the peer review and the extra scrutiny that they were being put under. Not that they were doing anything bad, it just wasn't worth the hassle from the business side of things. Okay. Any other comments on 410? Anything that stands out? Just seems we've been doing this, been working fine. Just by way of background, from my understanding, we've had stability in the finance department. We had she's now retired, Joe Barrick with the city for 20+ years, and then we had Jim Zervis for almost 8 years. So very strong finance department and a lot of experience. So our new administrative services director was just hired about a year ago. I foresee he's going to be here a long time as well. And so this is one area that we've had a lot of stability. Okay. Section 411 gets into ordinances in general. All of you, I don't know your knowledge base in terms of administrative affairs of the city, where you have ordinances versus resolutions. But maybe Henry, can you just give a quick overview, a distinction, ordinance versus resolution?
Yeah, so an ordinance is a document that actually changes the city's municipal code, and it goes in effect 30 days after it's passed, unless it's an urgency ordinance. A resolution is more of informal action by the city council. It's a way that they adopt policies and recommendations from the city. So an ordinance is a little more formal, and that's what you find in the city's municipal codes.
Okay. So basically the ordinances is our laws. It's our code. It's what we follow. And whenever there's a question in terms of zoning, land use, administrative fines, code enforcement, building code, it's all in our ordinance. So that's just a distinction. So this section is going to talk about that. So it talks about ordinances in general. So ordinances adopted by city council should be enacted or repealed in the form the city council of the city of Shafter does hereby ordain as follows. So that's the verbiage that all our ordinances has to contain. And you get into the form of ordinance. Every proposed ordinance shall be introduced in writing and in the form required for final adoption. An ordinance may be read by title only at the time of its introduction. It must be available to the public in full text when introduced. And the title of ordinance shall reflect accurately the subject of the ordinance. So this is for transparency purposes, open government, that basically any change in the code, any new law that we're introducing via our ordinance, we have to make it public and to make it available for the general public to read. And we can't, kind of put it in here where no one has access. It has to be readily available for the general public to be able to view it. Also, the description has to be clear. It can't be vague or ambiguous. It has to be clear as to what it is being proposed. And so that's stipulated here. And then the ordinance has to be read by title only at introduction. So we can waive the second reading. And that's oftentimes where you'll see on our agendas that we have a new ordinance. We'll have a public hearing and there'll be the reading of it. There'll be a staff report. When it comes back for the second hearing, oftentimes we'll just put it under consent calendar of the council meeting agenda. Matters under consent calendar are basically routine ministerial items. And so by then we've had the public hearing, it's been published, and now we're just waiving the second reading. So we put it under consent. Adoption of the ordinance. An ordinance may be introduced to by any council member at any regular council meeting. Second reading and adoption of the introduced ordinance shall be conducted at a regular meeting of the council, and the ordinance may be read by title only at second reading. So the introduction of the ordinance has to be at a regular meeting. We can't do it at a special meeting. And so it has to be widely publicized. So we meet the first and third Tuesday of every month. So we were going to adopt the ordinance. It would have to be at one of those two meetings. We couldn't do it at a special meeting. Again, that transparency, open government factor comes into play. The availability of the ordinance, again, basically the city clerk shall provide copies of the proposed ordinance prior to introduction and adoption. We shall make copies of the proposed ordinance available at reasonable cost of duplication to the public or interested persons. And the public shall have an opportunity to be heard on the proposed ordinance at any meeting the proposed ordinance is considered. So again, open government and allow public comment to come in. We typically will do the 10-day notice, publish it in the newspaper, have a public hearing. Part of that staff that item, the mayor will open a public hearing, ask for public comment, and then if anyone's in the audience that wishes to speak, we take that. And then the ordinance effective, as our city attorney's office said, entering, it's 30 days after adoption. So introduction, public hearing, comes back, the second hearing or consent calendar. Once it's adopted, at that second hearing, the ordinance will take effect 30 days from that date. So it can't be any sooner. Again, it's a due process that we give to the public. So 30 days from that is when it takes an effect. Okay. And then adoption of codes by reference. The council may adopt standard codes, compilations and codifications by reference without specific verbatim publication or codification of city code. And publication of ordinance, the city clerk shall publish every ordinance adopted by the council in full text or as a brief summary thereof within 20 days following such adoption in a newspaper of general circulation in the city, or if there's no newspaper of general circulation in the city, by posting in 3 public places. So if we didn't have a paper here, we can post, say, for example, outside at City Hall, at the library, maybe even at the police department. And those would be reasonable locations that the public has access to, that it's known to be frequent, so. We could even put it over at the coffee shop like at Starbucks now. Yeah. Okay. And then lastly, 4.2 gets into urgency ordinance. And so there are times that we, as a city, have to have urgency ordinances because, as stated here, in order to meet public urgency affecting life, health, property, or the public peace, or to respond to urgent matters as defined by the council. Many council may adopt urgency ordinances at any regular, adjourned, or special meeting. Urgency ordinance may not grant, renew, or extend a franchise or authorize the borrowing of money. So even though there's a urgency clause in here, it does restrict us in terms of what actions can be done with them. The introduction. An urgency ordinance should be introduced in the form and manner prescribed for ordinances generally, except that it shall be plainly designated as an urgency ordinance and shall contain, after the enacting clause, a declaration stating that urgency exists or stating the urgency of the matter covered in the proposed ordinance and describing such urgent matter in clear and specific terms. So basically, working with the city attorney, staff, we have to be very clear as to why. We have to make a determination and have findings that meet one of these areas in terms of why is it going to affect life and health? Is it property or public peace? You know, I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, we adopted an urgency ordinance for illegal fireworks. And so we were nearing 4th of July and we adopted an urgency ordinance to be able to ticket individuals lighting illegal fireworks. And so because that was for life, health, property, and public peace, we made a determination and had findings that stipulated and stated, hey, we have these issues, we have these concerns, these are our findings, and it meets why we're asking for this urgency ordinance. So that's an example of recent times when we've had a urgency ordinance adopted. It talks about the adoption, an urgency ordinance being adopted without amendment or rejected at the meeting in which it's introduced by the affirmative vote of at least 4 members. So it has to be the supermajority of the council. Required for adoption, the council consists of 5 members, or at least 3 members of the council consists of 4 members, and all 3 members of the council consist of only 3 members. So again, the supermajority, if you have 5, has to be 4. If 1 is absent and 4 here, has to be 3. And if you happen to only have 3, all 3 have to vote for it, has to vote for it. Okay. And then publication effective date. After adoption of an urgency ordinance, it should be published as prescribed for any other adopted ordinances, and it should become effective upon adoption or such later time as it may specify. So using that example of the illegal fireworks, that urgency ordinance that was adopted, that took effect immediately. We didn't have to wait the 30 days. Okay. And then readoption of urgency ordinance. Each urgency ordinance which the council wishes to continue in force and effect for a period longer than 60 days shall be reintroduced and readopted within 60 days pursuant to the procedures that set out in 4.11 hereof. So if we were to have, granted, I mean, that's to extend that illegal firework ordinance, and we could have done that in terms of urgency. Otherwise, we have to adopt it via the normal channels as we discussed earlier. So those are sections 1, 2, 3, and 4. I don't know if anything from that stands out. I think one of the things we're going to come back and give you do some research and come back to you is on section 4.06, council compensation, in terms of any new changes to the law regarding population and those dollar amounts. So we'll bring some more information to you on this section. Did I miss anything?
Gabriel,
Yes.
Gabriel, if you want, I'm ready to discuss that if you want. So the
Yeah,
government
go ahead.
the government code does provide that salary may be imposed by population, but it's been found that since the city of Shafter is a charter city, that government code does not apply to it.
Okay. So no need, they don't have to comply to the population.
No, they don't.
Okay, all right. That clarifies that. So again, that's an example of how as a charter city, certain government codes wouldn't apply to us because of that. So. Thank you, Henry. Okay, so anything, members of the committee on sections, articles 1 through 4? Hopefully the information Henry just provided on compensation suffices.
Keep going.
That's all we had.
Okay, good.
Members of the committee, it was on our schedule was to cover sections 1 through 4
Perfect.
at this meeting. Next meeting, we're gonna cover Articles 5, 6, 7, and 8
Next, at our next meeting.
at our next meeting.
I see I've already signed it. so.
Yeah, there you go. And then hopefully by the end of the week, we'll get you that matrix of comparison of some of the other charters.
Yeah, that'd be
So
good.
you have time to review.
So our next meeting is May 23rd at 5.
Yes.
Okay, bro, before we adjourn the meeting, we skipped over public comment. So if we can open up public comment to see if there's any from the public that would like to comment.
Yes, we're going to open that right now.
All right, thank you.
Public comment is open. I got my note right here.
I think there's someone on.
Well, Gabriel, if you're referring to me, it was an inadvertent communication. I just wanted to watch the charter commission meeting so that I could pay attention to what's being said and done. I was on the original charter committee and it was very well done at that time. And I know it needs change, but that's all. I wasn't really wanting to do public comment, just wanted to watch it.
Woody, you're always welcome to make a comment.
Okay, Dennis.
Thank you, Woody, for joining us.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Then we're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, we need a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. All right, move to adjourn.
And I second.
All those in favor, roll call?
Aye.
I.
Aye.